Audiogan is proud to partner with Unbox Cultural Futures Society and What Design Can Do. What Design Can Do is an international organization that seeks to accelerate the transition to a sustainable, fair, and just society using the power of design. What Design Can Do is launching Make It Circular Challenge, a global design competition building a circular future in partnership with IKEA. This challenge invites designers and creative entrepreneurs from everywhere to submit design driven climate innovations. The end goal? To show the world that circular future is not only imaginable but actionable. Winning projects will be propelled into 2023 with a €10,000 in funding and a tailor made development program. Submit your proposals online for free by 31st Jan 2023. Check out the design briefs and learn more about it on makeitcircular.whatdesigncando.com. Link in the show notes. And now today's episode. This is AudioGyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. Swami Vivekananda once said that get extensity with intensity, but not at its expense. I guess today's guest has been trying to achieve both very elegantly in her practice, both breadth and depth at the same time. Happy to have Ruchika Nambiar with us on AudioGyan. Ruchika is an artist, designer, and writer. Her work ranges across media from publishing books, graphic memoirs, interactive social media stories, designing, consulting, practice for brands and businesses, as well as mentorship programs for young artists and designers. We'll be talking about what it takes to, or what it's being an interdisciplinary designer. She has some really cool, well documented videos on her YouTube channel and website. Links in the show notes. So, welcome, Ruchika, to AudioGyan, and thanks for giving your time. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Kedar. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. So I wish to have the conversation mainly revolving around what it means or what is it like being an interdisciplinary designer. And since you're an artist, designer, and I've heard these words, multidisciplinary artist and interdisciplinary designer. So I just wanted to start off by asking, what's your definition of design, and then what's your definition of art? Like, how do you see it? Because you have been engaged in academic practices as well, so maybe good to understand as a founding block, I can say.
So I don't know. I've never really, as you can probably tell from my work, I've never really bothered with classifying myself in any specific or definitive way. I just kind of like flit around doing whatever it is that I like to do, and then I worry about the labels and the definitions later. But I think in terms of the sort of distinction between art and design specifically, I've always seen design as something of a strategic activity. I've never seen design as being the content of the work, but rather the method or the approach or it's about how you do something rather than what you do. And I've always thought of art in the opposite way, where it's about what you're putting into the work and what you're trying to say with it, and design being how you say it and how you choose to kind of communicate. And I've never been one of those artists who are, okay to leave their work open to interpretation or chance. I'm a very controlling person, actually. So I like to, I think of every art project also as a project of design where, I'm thinking about what it means to communicate an idea and how best to do that and how to go about that in a very strategic way. What is the effect it's having on the person that's consuming it, and how do you go about making that better? So it's almost as if I approach even my art projects or my writing projects with something of a strategic design sensibility to try and, it's almost as if there are conversion metrics in some sense, right? Which is not something you necessarily hear about artwork. Usually art is open to interpretation, open to sort of subjective interpretation. But I've never really quite been okay with that, because I feel like I'm a communicator at the core of everything else. And so for me, effective communication means that somebody is getting out of my work exactly what it is that I want them to get out of it, almost like you would measure conversion rates when you're using a website or an app or something like that. I always want to kind of make sure that somebody is understanding exactly what it is that I'm saying and how I'm saying it. And so I feel like that way I try to be very intentional about all of my choices when it comes to my practice, no matter what type of project I'm working on, what kind of medium I'm choosing, what style of communication, how effective is it in getting its message across. So I think that's where the sort of interplay between art and design enters my practice.
Great, great. I think I resonate with your thought process on multiple levels, because even I'm not an artist, but as you can see, some artwork which I'm trying to do, and it's typically trying to communicate something, and I wish to control the narrative. While
Right.
because of AudioGAN and my sort of just like good fortune to speak with like really great artists as well, who are like stricter, in a strict sense, more artists. Recently, I interviewed Srijan Deshpande, and he said, I think he quoted some famous definition of art, which is art is half truth, and then the rest of the truth is left on to the audience to uncover or
Right.
discover or interpret. Yeah. So, do you feel? I mean, because even I'm in that same zone, what you mentioned, I've been trying to explore that. Does it have to have a meaning? Does it need to follow a particular lineage? Does it have a pedigree? Are there these kind of people? And somewhere I stumbled upon didactic art. Does it sort of come on that front, or no? Like, you haven't given it any categorization, as you said.
Yeah, I can't say that I've thought about again, I hardly ever really reflect on definitions too much, or rather the only reason that I reflect on definitions is because other people always ask me, to kind of describe what I do, and then I have to start, kind of sit down and think about
Make it relatable or
creating this
something.
sort of like this retroactive narrative that sort of ties my practice together. But I would think that I mean, in terms of the conversation around pedigree, there is, of course, a perceivable pedigree and lineage to any kind of industry and any kind of any specific discipline. But I feel like um, within the creative industry, you can kind of enter it from anywhere in a sense, right? There are people who are trained in a particular way, who are able to enter it in one way, and then there are people who are, say, self-taught. They're also able to enter it in a different way, and they're all able to bring different types of value into the space. They may kind of contest with each other in different ways on different sort of battlegrounds, but at the same time, they are all able to kind of enter into the space and make something out of it for themselves. And so the barrier for entry is quite different in the creative industry. You are able to it's lowered, and you are a lot of different types of people are able to enter it with their own perspectives, with their own skills. And I've always thought that this creating this sort of hardline distinction between who is an artist and who is a designer has always been kind of misguided, because in my view, they're not necessarily, it's like comparing apples and oranges. They're not necessarily comparable in that way, because like I was saying, I think art is about what you put into it and design is about how you do it. And in that sense, I feel like I have always maintained that I think everybody, literally everybody, should have some sort of basic training in design, because I just think it's just an important life skill to have at a certain point, where I have seen how people who have certain design sensibilities just are able to go about their life in a different way and go about their work in a different way, even if they're an accountant or administrator or somebody who has absolutely nothing to do with the creative industry. Just to know how to be able to say, put together a pitch or present an idea to an investor or anything like that. If you're a salesperson, if you're even just putting an Excel sheet together, if you're an accountant, it makes such a difference when you are when you understand the sensibilities of design, and to be able to kind of translate those skills into any medium, whatever you're working in, makes such a difference to the way that you are able to communicate yourself to other people, the way that you're able to persuade them towards your ideas. And that's the crux of, I mean, that's what any job boils down to, right? It's you just trying to persuade somebody to do something a certain way, whether you're persuading them to sell something, whether you're persuading them towards a certain idea. And so I think that, just knowing what it means to be a good designer, it becomes such a crucial skill set in that process. And so I've always maintained that everybody should be a better designer in some sense, or learn to be a better designer, because I think it just it helps them in their practice no matter what. And I find that is especially useful for me in my art practice, because it comes down to like the little details of how do I choose to present my work on my website, or how am I choosing to communicate my work? How am I choosing to talk about my work? It comes into my art and writing practice, where I'm thinking about what does it mean for somebody to consume my writing, even if I'm doing a more academic piece. And academic writing, typically, I mean, it's there is a fair range, but on the whole, the perception of academic writing is that it's quite dry and very kind of dense to consume. And so I have always been sort of invested in this question of how to counter that a little bit. How do you think about it in a way that makes it easier to consume, more digestible? And so I think digestibility has been like a big
undercurrent within all
that runs across all of my work, where I am always continuously trying to think of how, even if this is a really complex piece of work to consume, how do you make it pleasant to consume? How do you make it easy to consume? How do you think about it being a pleasurable experience for the person who's consuming your work? And I feel like that kind of thoughtfulness comes from being trained in the sort of trained in the discipline of design, and being able to think about how somebody consumes your work. And I think that that's just I feel like it's just a very basic skill that everybody should have or should be trained in, because it just it really kind of helps you take your work to a different place and a different level.
Correct. No, I think I'm quite excited about the follow-up questions, because I see a lot more common in the thought process that sort of you follow. And because when you said that it should be almost like a life skill, because in my workshops or wherever I take sort of design sessions, I generally give this redesign your Indian railway ticket, which is kind of a pass or a railway, like just basic stuff. And if a young student who like is sensitive, or at least has some aesthetic angle, has some communication sort of understanding that, hey, like this is important and this, and if for whatever reason he or she becomes somewhere in railways or whatever, and they are exposed to that early on in their life, it will make a big difference while taking certain decisions, even if it's outsourced completely.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. I think, I mean, I've said this at some point, where I feel like design is really just a way of pushing the world closer to what it should be. And I think that takes many different forms, and that's basically about how we interact with the world around us in whatever forms it presents itself to us. And I think just thinking about how something can be a little bit closer to ideal, whether that's a billboard or a railway ticket or a chair, whatever it is, you're just basically thinking about how to kind of push the world just a tiny bit closer to the way it should be. And I think that's why it can be it needs to be a skill that just cuts across all disciplines. And so nobody should ever be faced with the question of like, are you a designer specifically, or are you an artist? Are you a designer? Are you an accountant? Are you an HR person? And that shouldn't be a question, because design should just be a skill like math or like history, where everybody's had some sort of basic training in it.
Yeah, I hope with the new education policy, they are saying that it will be part of the curriculum from first standard. Right. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. So just moving to the next one is that what does it sort of really mean to be an interdisciplinary designer? I mean, from where I am standing today, I'm slightly confused that is it an outcome? Is it an input? Like you want to become like that? Or I know you have captured that in multiple talks, but I just thought that could help some of the listeners.
So this is something I actually enjoy talking about, specifically because we're in this particular time where there is this appeal and this allure of being interdisciplinary. And so I like to give time and talk about all of the different practical realities and challenges that go into trying to be interdisciplinary, because I think it's important for people to understand what it is, but also what it isn't, and why it can sometimes be difficult, why sometimes maybe it's not the choice for a particular person, and maybe it's just that they're kind of trying to experiment with a few things before they find their sort of natural calling, which is also a very valid and very likely thing to happen with a lot of people, where they try out a lot of different things and then they find that one really kind of speaks to them more strongly, and then they're able to completely immerse themselves in that particular discipline. But I think that being an interdisciplinary practitioner has a lot of different advantages, in that you're able to draw from skill sets across a variety of disciplines. So being able to understand the nuances of writing, or being able to understand the nuances of, say, a particular type of craft that something that you work with your hands, or being able to again, just being able to cut across different disciplines and be able to draw from their skill sets starts kind of, these things start bleeding into each other, and they are able to then inform every aspect of your practice. And so I find that, for me at least, one of the advantages of being an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary practitioner, whatever it is, I find that it allows me to kind of capture my audience's interest in new and unexpected ways, simply because my work is always kind of form agnostic, and it kind of tends to, different disciplines and mediums tend to bleed into one another. Nothing is ever very neatly or cleanly classified or put into a specific box. For example, recently I wrote this very sort of academic essay here where I am at RISD right now, and I chose to kind of write it in almost a little bit like a graphic novel, like a graphic essay, and so being able to kind of borrow from different disciplines and put that into a piece of work helps kind of create an outcome that is not entirely expected. And I find that captures people's interest a lot more easily, and it allows them to kind of enter a piece of work in a new way. And it also keeps them a little bit on their toes as to what to expect from a particular piece. And it allows them the opportunity to kind of be surprised by something. They're not able to fully figure out what to expect from a certain piece. They don't come into it with the same preconceived notions. So I feel that it really kind of dissolves a lot of barriers that people may usually enter a piece of work with, where, a lot of people, if they are able to classify.
Yeah, no, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask, I'm getting the drift, but is it finally to achieve an output, as in this is the intent, I want to reach out to these people, or help them understand or communicate better, or what is the idea? Or is it more of a intrinsic drive to explore other things? I mean, yes, it's always a balance, but
Mhm.
where is it skewed towards, mainly in your
Right.
context, maybe?
I would say for me, at least, it's more outcome driven because I feel like I have always, for me, the sort of core um, goal behind any project that I do is to be able to um, communicate a certain idea. And for me, that communication needs to be, it needs to um, be as wide ranging as possible. I want as many people as possible to be able to access a certain idea, even if it's a complex idea, even if it's an idea that they've not engaged with, even if it's an idea that makes them uncomfortable. And so I've never wanted to be very limiting in terms of who or what my audience is. And I've always tried to see, okay, how can I if I am writing a very, very academic piece, can I make it such that even my mother, who does not care for that type of work, can enter into the piece and find a way to engage with it and find a way to get value out of it? And so I feel like my work, at least, is very um, is very much outcome driven, and I think that's why I care so much about the form and the medium in which something is communicated, because I feel like I want to be able to use all my skill sets across all disciplines to be able to uh, communicate something more effectively. So if I have design skills, that will help me do that. If I have writing skills, that will help me do that. If I have artistic skills or visual narrative skills, that will help me do that. I want to bring all of those together so that it creates the most effective kind of communication. And I feel like communication is a very outcome driven goal. You are,
Mm.
when you're trying to communicate something, you are trying to make sure that the person on the other end is getting it in exactly the way that you want them to get it. And I feel like that has been a driving force behind any kind of project that I've worked on, where I am there are a lot of people who will, are putting into some putting their thoughts and ideas into a piece of work so that it can almost the work can kind of hold it and store it, and they may not be so concerned with how it's read beyond a certain beyond a certain circle or bubble. Like maybe they just need it to be readable and digestible only to say like-minded people or people in the same industry. And for me, that has never really been the case with my work. For me, I've always wanted I don't care so much about people in my specific discipline or industry being able to consume my work. I'm like I don't want to think about who exactly is consuming my work. I want it to be as wide ranging as possible and be able to speak to as many people as I can manage. And obviously, that's a bit of an
Personal choice
idealistic,
also.
or I mean, it's also kind of it's a horizon you can never really reach. There is no piece of work that's always going to speak to everybody that you on the
Mm.
planet.
Mm.
But at the same time, I feel like that
That's the drive,
striving,
mainly. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, striving for that kind of goal really helps helps me push further and try to keep sort of improving on how my work communicates itself.
Mm. Yeah, good to know that, because I have a like a almost identical but a parallel narrative which I
Mm-hmm.
was grappling with. Is I'm still sort of exploring, but I don't remember where, and I was trying to find out that TED talk
Mm-hmm.
before this recording. Was that I think there was this woman who said, like, I want to bust the myth of jack of all, master of none kind of
Right.
thing. And but her sort of exploration, and the reason why I said it's a parallel, identical but a parallel sort of stream, because words fail, so like prose fails, so they go to poetry, and poetry
Mm,
fails, so they go to painting, and painting fails, so they go to sculpture. So
right.
they go interdisciplinary, they go sort of cross disciplinary, but it's just because they feel that the medium is not strong enough for
Right.
them to express. It's a
Right.
different school of thought, and I think that's more from a internal thing than an outcome
Y-
driven. But
Right.
yeah,
I
fascinating.
I think I think there is. I mean, this question of jack of all trades, master of none. I definitely. I mean, I kind of. I like to kind of challenge that as well, a little bit, because it is. I do like to engage in lots of different types of work. And so I've never really wanted to put myself in the position of having to choose between any of them. And I feel like that has driven a lot of my efforts, and the way that I have tried to map out my career trajectory in general is to see how I can support all of these different types of practices while still making them sort of financially viable, and not just treating them all like hobbies, but treating them with a certain level of seriousness. But at the same time, this is why I like to talk to people about what it means to be interdisciplinary, especially when they are in my mentorship program with sort of young artists and designers, all of whom have this question. A lot of people, the reason I had made that video that you're talking about, where I'm talking about what it means to have an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary practice, is because I get that question really often from young artists and designers about what it actually means. They have a lot of different interests. How do you bring that together into a cohesive practice? How do you take all of these different ideas forward across these different disciplines? And so the thing that I always maintain with them is, in a way, the jack of all trades, master of none problem is a real one, simply because you can, with any discipline, there is a certain craft to it, and there is a certain craft to writing, for example. There's a craft to miniature making. There is a craft to any kind of artistry. And the more you do anything, the better you get at it. I mean, that's something anybody can sort of understand through practice. Like, for example, I think what episode number is this? This is somewhere in the hundreds, I think.
This one, the one which we are recording?
Yeah.
I think it will be around 263rd or something.
Oh, there, yeah. So it's in the high 200s. But just by doing 200 episodes, there would have been so many learnings that happened in that process. And, or somebody who's cooking on an everyday basis, they know the difference on day 1 and day 30 and day 90 and day 200. But so there is a certain learning to be had by sticking with one discipline and being able to kind of get better at it. And this is where the sort of practicality of interdisciplinarity comes into it, is that being interdisciplinary is a very alluring thing, especially when you are younger and when you are, wanting to explore a lot of different things. You don't really want to tie yourself down to any one particular discipline. The challenge of it comes about when you start reaching your sort of the mid-career stage, where you are trying to ramp up and you're trying to level up. You're trying to be able to monetize your work. You're trying to be able to, land bigger projects, more profitable projects, and things like that. And that's where the sort of questions and doubts start to come in as to how skilled am I really in this particular type of work to be able to, say, charge a certain amount for it, to be able to go after certain kinds of projects or certain kinds of clients. And then it kind of it can to a certain degree impact your own confidence in your ability to do those things, because you may feel like, I'm just not skilled enough in this particular thing. So that is a very real problem that comes up when you dabble across different disciplines, where you've done a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you reach a particular stage where you know a lot of different things, a little bit of a lot of different things, but you're never fully sure as to whether you are good enough at any of them to be able to be considered, say, an expert in that particular area. Because the reality is that when you may be interdisciplinary, that's something that people will be very interested in when it comes to just thinking about your practice as a whole. But when people actually come to you for work, like somebody is coming to me for a specific kind of work, they're coming to me for, say, a design consulting project, a branding project, a publication design project, or they're coming to me for a miniature art commission. They are going to look at those specific things, and they're going to come to you if they think you're good at it. And so the onus is then on you to be able to build different skills in parallel, and that is an extraordinarily challenging and exhausting thing to do. But at the same time, again, if you kind of be strategic about it and be aware of that problem that you're going to come up against, I think there are ways to kind of mitigate it and work around it, as long as you see it coming. So, and you don't allow it to sneak up on you. And so I think that's something I always stress on when I'm talking to young artists and designers who are just kind of starting out, want to do a whole bunch of different things. And so I'm always sort of careful to tell them that's great. And I think that's an amazing place to start. I always advocate for being as interdisciplinary as you can, but you also want to be aware of what challenges come with being interdisciplinary so that you can work around them and be, sort of know how to navigate it more intelligently so that you don't end up coming up against this problem. And also sometimes interdisciplinarity can be a sort of, it's romanticized and fetishized a little bit, where, it's this very romantic, idealistic idea of never really having to pick a particular discipline. But then there are a lot of times where, like I was saying, the more people get comfortable with their own work, the more awareness they build around their own work, they find that they're just automatically drawn towards a particular medium and they want to kind of settle down and commit themselves to it. And I feel like that's also a very valid choice to make, and people should kind of give themselves the freedom to do that at a later stage in their life, if they so choose, so they don't want to marry themselves too strongly also to this notion of interdisciplinarity, and then box themselves in and later say, oh no, I actually want to be a filmmaker and I just want to do that for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I have branded myself so strongly as this interdisciplinary person that I can't really let go of it. And I need to keep, doing these 100 different things all at once. So I feel like people need to be willing also to kind of just let go of their interdisciplinarity at a later stage if their career takes that path.
Correct. No, it's amazing. And I think all these sort of questions, or whatever we call very loosely midlife crisis, like 30s and 40s, what am I going to do next? Those kind of questions in the career aspect, I think they come when you're a little more aware of yourself.
Right.
And sort of you introspect or you reflect back on your work and look after. I'm not, at least in my sort of immediate network, or three circles down the line, very few of them really pause and reflect, and it's very critical, but it doesn't happen. And I keep swinging between these two spectrums where I want to try everything, and that's one sign of which is manifested as audio GAN. I speak to musicians and sculptors and puppeteers and writers, everyone. And somewhere in my career, I've been just going deeper and deeper in understanding problem statements and building digital products. So yeah, I'm trying to find that right balance. And the closest that I've come to was the quote which I started, was that get extensity with intensity and not at its expense. And the way I'm trying to sort of, maybe some tip from my side is that, for the listeners, obviously, is I've narrowed down to two definitions, which is one is Vikalp and one is Sankalp. Vikalp is you explore, you go horizontally, you go wide, you just do all the window shopping that you want. But then Sankalp is that you get into one store and just buy the stuff and probably wear for the rest of your life. I don't know. But yeah, there's no boundary or directive as such. It's just you land up in acquiring or sort of whatever finds you peace.
And I think that is that's the sort of challenge people face when they're trying to sort of build this interdisciplinary practices. They don't quite know how to practically go about it, where you want to do all of these different things, but then what does it actually mean to try and do multiple things at once? What does it mean to actually, like you were saying, go into a store and actually commit to something? And I feel like the how to kind of manage your time becomes a very, very important, crucial question in that process, because then I always talk about how it makes sense to have certain kinds of slightly long-term goals, like goals that are going over a couple of months or maybe a yearly goal and things like that, where you focus on a specific kind of project or a specific kind of discipline for a significant chunk of time, so that you're building a certain kind of familiarity with it. You're not jumping across things from week to week necessarily, or even if you are still putting in a dedicated amount of time into one particular thing, so that you're actually able to take that to the next level, and not just kind of leave everything in this middling position and leave everything a little half-baked, where you are kind of trying to make sure that everything is done with a certain kind of intentionality and a certain kind of rigor, no matter what discipline you're working in. And so I think that becomes important about how you end up managing your time and devoting your time across different things.
Yeah, actually, that sparked one like top of the mind. Like it just struck me is that maybe that was one of the reasons the Guru Shishya Parampara was really helpful back then. I mean, first 20 years, yes, you were under guidance of someone,
right?
Hopefully a good guru in the true sense, not in the recent sense. But and then hopefully you find that one thing much early, maybe in 20s, and between 20 to 25, you figure out that this is my calling. Otherwise, the guru also can guide you, and then you can pursue it. I think that was an interesting thought, because when you said that it could be a natural calling, I think just to facilitate it, maybe early on you can go deeper into multiple things.
For sure. I think that's what makes mentorship so important, because I feel like education, or like the education system, doesn't necessarily focus on building a reflective practice for yourself, and like you were mentioning as well, I mean, that becomes such a crucial aspect. I have always tried to build as much self-awareness as I can about my work and about myself, and that I try to put that into my work. But that's not that again is another life skill that should be taught, is a very basic skill like math, and it isn't. And I think that what you said right now about this guru shishya relationship, where you have somebody who is able to kind of guide you through your thinking, and that's what's the crux of it. It's not about them necessarily teaching you. I mean, it might come with them teaching you some specific kind of skill, but at the same time, it's about them being able to clarify your thought processes and help you just reflect in a more aware manner about yourself and your work. And then that ends up bleeding into all aspects of your life and the way that you show up in your life. And I think that just becomes really important. So I feel like that's why I think mentorship then becomes an important thing, because for me, at least, I've had some really great mentors across my the last 10 years or so, who've really kind of helped me think about my work more clearly and helped me kind of push it to the next level. And so I think that becomes really important, to then kind of seek out and identify mentors who can do that for you and be able to impact you in that way.
Cool. So maybe you can also talk about, I mean, we are just coming down more to the real world from the philosophical. Right. Is that I'm sure you must be following certain these kind of interdisciplinary designers, or maybe in your example also. What comes first? Is it sort of the thought to, hey, I want to play with clay, or I want to play with, I mean, there are different mediums, right? So what does the thought comes first, as in, this is what I want to communicate. I want to say, like, talk about whatever the 3,000 forts that Shivaji conquered and whatever, like some World War II kind of an episode, which I want to communicate. Or you stumble upon an interesting material or a piece of writing, and that's how it sparks. Like, typically what happens, maybe if you're not aware of other people, or maybe yes, but in your case also, it would be great.
So I think what draws me to anybody else's work is really their ability to package complexity, and they're able to kind of express very, very complex experiences. And that usually I end up being drawn to different storytellers of some kind. There is a
Mm.
miniature artist called Laurie Nix who creates these incredible apocalyptic sort of dioramas. And I am drawn to like the work of comic artist Chris Ware or Alison Bechtel, who writes graphic novels, or even writers like David Foster Wallace or Valeria Luiselli. I'm basically interested in how people are able to communicate experiences with a certain kind of nuance. And when they're able to do that successfully, that's what really kind of excites me about someone else's work, and to be able to really break down their techniques and processes. I like to think of people who are able to do that. I tend to think of them as very, very skilled technicians. There is a certain finesse to their technique and their ability to kind of weave different things together. And it's almost like, somebody composing a piece of music, or like, putting together something really complicated with different elements. And then there is a good way to do it. There's a better way to do it. There's, an ideal way to do it. And so there is a sort of spectrum of value and spectrum of quality. And so that's why I like to think of them as technicians, where it's thinking about how somebody even composes something as simple as a sentence and the choices that they make in putting something like that together, or how you compose an image, how do you put together a series of images, how do you put together something like a graphic novel, what's happening in the boxes, what's happening in between, what's happening in the little gaps in between. So when I see somebody who's able to think about those things and play with those elements with a certain kind of intentionality and towards a certain kind of effect, I feel like those are the works that I'm drawn towards most, and those are the works that I take inspiration from in my own work, to think about how to kind of weave together multiple very complex elements in a harmonious way, and to ultimately just be able to communicate a really complex and layered experience. Because for me, I feel like that's what any of my work is trying to do, is to be able to take complicated experiences and then be able to translate them into some kind of form where the person who's consuming it is able to experience almost the same thing, or get as close to the original source as possible. And so to be able to harness different skill sets to be able to do that as effectively as possible is what kind of excites me in my work. And so when I see other people being able to successfully do that in their work, I think that's what really kind of gets me going.
Mm-hmm. But doesn't it, because if it is, it sort of fair to assume that it's not starting off with a thought, but it's kind of gray and fuzzy in the start, but as you kind of explore, it's more of an artistic, I think, journey. But doesn't it sort of restrict, because the ways to communicate a thought could be endless?
Sure.
So then how do you curate that? Yes, I want to tell. By the way, I made a mistake by saying 3,000. It's 374s of Shivaji. Yeah. Yeah, like, how do you curate that? I want to tell this story, or
Mm-hmm.
I want to communicate this piece of content or information or whatever, the backstory.
Right.
And there are like 8 different ways. There could be a miniature, the
Yeah.
dollhouse
Yeah.
project. I mean,
Sure.
I'm sure the dollhouse project could have
Yeah, it
come up in
it takes
different
it
renditions.
on its own takes up a few different. I mean, it ends up expressing itself in multiple different ways, for sure.
Correct. So then how do you arrive at, like, okay, this is good enough?
I feel like I don't know if I have a good answer to your question, but I think I try to be as intuitive as I can about how I approach my work, where
Beautiful.
I have a certain feel for a particular kind of idea, if it needs a certain kind of depth that can only be explored in writing, or if it has a particular kind of if I want my audience to be able to visualize it in a particular way, and then I need a visual component to it. If I want them to interact with it in a certain way, maybe it requires it expresses itself in the form of miniatures. I feel like those decisions I can't say that I necessarily arrive at it with any conscious intentionality, because I feel like when I think of an idea, for me, like you said, it's a little gray and fuzzy, but at the same time, I have a kind of I always start with a vision of what the project um, is going to look like at the end, when I have a particular idea and I think, oh, this is going to be great as a book, this is going to be great as a miniature project, and so I these outputs end up being quite different from project to project, but at the same time, when I start with a particular project, it's usually with a fairly clear idea of what I want the final thing to look like. I usually have like this sort of vision of what I want the actual artifact or the piece to look like. So for example, even if I just start writing a book, in my head, I'm already picturing what it means to hold that book in my hand. What is the cover like? What is the kind of paper I'm going to use for it? So I have this idea of what I want this object to be in the world, and how I want it to kind of manifest in the world. And so I always kind of start from that place. I don't quite know how to break down what that process is.
Correct,
in
correct. No, no,
terms of
so,
you know, where does that particular idea come from? Where does it originate?
yeah.
When is the seed planted? It might have just been something that, for example, with my graphic memoir, The Breadcrumb, that came about because I had read this other graphic novel, Fun Home, by Alison Bechdel, and I became acquainted with her work. And I started reading these graphic novels and realizing that this is just a fantastic medium to be able to express a certain kind of internal monologue. And so, I think to some degree, it comes from engaging with other people's work and seeing what's possible within a certain medium. And then that sparks an idea of, oh, there's this particular idea that I want to express, and I think it would work really well in the form of a graphic novel. And so I think being engaged with other people's work then becomes really crucial in kind of setting off those sparks of inspiration, and those ideas. Like I did not even know that I had any interest in miniature making until I took a very random diorama making course, like a 4-week diorama making course back in undergrad. And that was completely out of the blue. And I had no idea that I had any particular interest in miniatures. But that course for me allowed me to kind of discover this entirely new medium of storytelling. And when I discovered that, I was like, this is a fantastic medium for being able to tell these visual, three-dimensional, non-linear stories. And so for me, the minute I discover the possibilities of a medium, I feel like maybe that sparks a particular idea that would then translate well into that medium, where I think, oh, this is a really interesting medium to tell a non-linear story, and to be able to kind of create this little microcosm, or this little world that is kind of within our world, but also separate from it. And so when I think about the possibilities of the medium, that for me, that was when the idea for the Dollhouse Project was first kind of seeded into my brain, where I was thinking, oh, it would be wonderful and exciting to be able to create like this little parallel reality, or this little parallel universe, where a different version of myself is able to live her own life. And so that came about because I was then introduced to the medium of miniature making. So I think, through answering your question, I feel like I have now become a little bit more aware of where that, how that thought process begins, of like what medium to choose. I think when I discover a new medium, or when I'm acquainted with a new medium, and I think, oh, this medium has these possibilities, and what can I then do with it? And I think that sparks ideas of what then to do with the medium.
Correct. No, I completely understand. This is kind of a very tricky question, especially asking creative folks, and that has been my journey so far. So when you and the reason when you said intuition, I just like got the point, because musicians, even I think Varun Grover's interview, and lot of artists, even Sudhir Patwardhan, when I was talking about like how do you start a painting, most likely it's intuition. Most of the time it's intuition, because I don't know. Again, I'm classifying or going deep into difference between intuition and instinct. But yeah, that's a separate story. But it starts with something which is kind of, there's something inside, and then there is an external stimuli,
Yeah.
and then you sort of figure out something.
Yeah.
I have a brilliant thing to share if that helps
Yeah.
other, again, listeners, and something for you to ponder upon. That in the Indian tradition, I think it's in Hindu philosophy somewhere. The ritual is called Arundhati Darshan Nyay. Okay, and what it means is uh, Arundhati is a star, uh, which is, and Arundhati as a character in mythology is also considered to be sort of whatever epitome of chastity and stuff like that. And the star revolves around a sage called Vashisht. And because Vashisht is slightly bigger, the Arundhati is always faint, fuzzy, and sort of not very clear. But she's like pure as whatever, like whatever. Now, in this tradition, what happens is the newly whatever bridegroom, on the wedding night, the person shows, as in like the male shows that the Arundhati, it just points out. And when you're pointing out, you really don't know exactly where it is. So you take smaller steps. You say, okay, can you see this building? Okay. Can you see the antenna next to it? Can you go 3 centimeters above? Take a right, and then you slowly reach that point, right? And if, so in obviously in the Western world, we have North Star as a similar concept, that you know something, you know, or maybe you have like visualized, or as you said, I had a vision of what I wanted, but it just unfolds as you go along. In fact, I use this narrative in while talking about MVPs. When you design MVPs, it's almost similar. I call it minimum visible path. It's just that much, you know, so you walk it very thoroughly, and it also helps in, I believe, knowing your calling also, because you're walking the path and you're trying to explore as well.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I don't remember where I read this or who said it, but there was somewhere where I said it's kind of like you know, headlights in the dark, where as long as you have an idea of a final destination, but at the same time, your headlights only need to light up the first 200 meters ahead of you, and you're able to make it to your destination. You don't necessarily need to see the entire path right at the start. Beautiful. There may be turns and bumps along the way, but at the same time, as long as you're able to get ahead step by step, you are able to eventually reach the final destination. But at any one point, you only need visibility of the next beautiful. 200 meters ahead, or how much ever your headlights are able to illuminate for you.
Beautiful. Cool. So Ruchika, I have two last questions, and one is more of, again, like going a bit philosophical or whatever, like strategic, and the last one is obviously more tactical and more hands-on.
Sure.
So the one which is the first is like, because you are hoping to go wide and explore different mediums and so on and so forth. I remember one interview where not audio gan, but someone was interviewing Varun Grover, and he said that if you want to write, don't read for now. Like, you can read, but don't read. Like, go and maybe like do cooking or do something else other than this, right? Yeah, I think he said, like, if you wish to write, do all other things than writing. Basically expose yourself to many other things. Now, in this case, how does it fit in? Because you might just see some good person like doing some sculptor and like, or whatever, sculpture, and then that's what you wanted in your work. Now, you know what I mean, right?
I feel like that bit of advice translates across different mediums, actually, and I think it comes down to any form of any form of work that involves like an ideation to execution process, where there is a certain rigor to ideation, and then there is a certain rigor to execution, and those are different types of processes, and sometimes you do need a little bit of a break between those things in order to approach them with a certain kind of clarity. And so for me, I find that no matter what type of work it is, whether it's a writing project, whether it's an artistic project, whatever it is, there is a certain point where I feel like I don't quite know how to go about this, or I don't quite know what to do with this. And that's when I do need to take a step away from it and, just kind of do something else, work on something else, or just kind of move away from it for a little while. When I can feel myself hitting a wall of some sort and, kind of coming up against a wall where I'm not quite sure how to, kind of move past it. And I feel like that's something that comes a little bit with, as your practice sort of matures and you become a little more familiar with your own habits and tendencies of working. It can be a very nerve-wracking and scary thing when you're much, much younger, for sure, where you're like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to move forward with this, especially if you're say in college, you have deadlines to meet and things like that, and you don't quite know, you're kind of stuck with a particular idea, you don't really know how to move forward. And I think that can be a little nerve-wracking, but I think the more you do it, you realize that you have to have a little bit of faith in yourself that you're going to figure this out with the tools that you have. And so I think for me, something that has been very sort of relieving and allowed me to kind of go a little easier on myself is realizing that I'm actually quite decent when it comes to improvising last minute, or being able to problem solve on the fly. And so I think it really just becomes then a process of kind of building faith in yourself and your own abilities, and realizing that it's fine if I step away from this for a while. It is going to, I am going to be able to come back to it with a renewed kind of energy and be able to tackle this problem in a different way. And it also helps, I think, stepping away. The reason that it helps is because I think it engages your lateral thinking ability a lot better, where if you're trying to solve a problem in a particular way, or trying to arrive at a particular kind of solution, you're doing that with a certain notion of what that solution needs to be. You are trying to say, okay, this is the outcome I want, and this is how to get to it. And so you end up developing a little bit of tunnel vision when you are just stuck with that one thing, and you're just not. You're basically again kind of just like hitting a wall over and over again and expecting a different result each time you come up against it. And so I think stepping away allows you to then see, oh no, wait, maybe I'm thinking about this entirely wrong. And what if I approach it from the side? And what if I'm approaching it from a different direction? And so I think stepping away from something gives you that space to kind of get out of that tunnel vision a little bit and be able to then suddenly see the problem in an entirely new way. And that's where solutions really kind of come from, is when you're not continuously, if you sense a wall, then you're not just like hitting against it again and again and then hoping that at some point it will finally crack or give way. It's not going to. You need to be approaching it in a different way. So I think for me, I think that's where it really intuition really comes into play, where you want to, I think intuition itself, it's a skill, it's a very, very fine skill. People don't think of it as necessarily as a skillful thing, but actually the more you practice sort of paying attention to your intuition, it really starts to speak to you more easily over time, and it starts to get louder. It's a very sort of faint voice in your head and it's like a sense that you have of things. So for me, I try to kind of, as much as possible, train my intuition to be able to kind of sense different things around me. So for example, if I'm hitting a wall, I try to recognize that as quickly as I can, to try and see, okay, this something doesn't feel right about this particular path towards a project, or this particular method of approaching this particular project. Something feels a little off. You want to be able to develop that sensibility of saying, oh no, it feels like I'm trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Like you want to be able to develop your intuition to that level of specificity, where you are able to sense what it is that you're grappling with. Does it feel like I'm hitting against a wall? Does it feel like I'm kind of stuck in a hole that I can't climb out of? You want to be able to visualize visualize these experiential realities of your own in as specific a manner as possible, because I think when you arrive at that level of specificity, you then know what to do about it. When you know, okay, I'm hitting a wall over and over again, and then if you are able to recognize that with clarity, then you know, okay, I need to find a different way to approach this. This is not the way to, because then it just expends your energy when you keep trying to do the same thing and then you're expecting different results each time. So I think that's why it just becomes really important to then develop your intuitive skills to be able to kind of get a sense of how you're moving through your life and your work, and then be able to navigate it more intelligently. So yeah, I think that's where that is.
No, I think what you're saying is making complete sense, but I think because I've been through that little journey, I can sort of connect the dots.
Right.
But it's typically just how much have you explored or how much have you exposed yourself to 10,000 things.
Sure.
Then it seeps in, and then it sort of surfaces up at the right time. So just stepping away can be a good one. Yeah, and interesting. Faith, interesting sort of keywords are helping me understand. Cool. One last question, which is more on the tactical front, because I love the video where you have sort of explained, I think it's called the 10 practical realities of multidisciplinary practice.
Right.
I'm going to put that in the show notes. In the end, you have, obviously, it's quite a big feat that you have covered so many things, but you speak about being a project manager, handling billing, building relationships. I mean, going solo seems like a very gigantic feat. Yes, to a certain extent, it has, because of Instagram and other influencer channels. Now it is little simple, but it seems simple at the end of the tunnel. So that's also a different story. But like then, yeah, why? Like why? What is sort of what keeps you motivated, or like ये करना ही क्यों है, मतलब इतना मेहनत types?
I think that's a really great question to end on, specifically because I feel like that kind of really speaks to one of the sort of core driving forces behind my practice, which is to be able to kind of operate as a bit of a free agent. And I was actually planning to make a similar sort of little video in the same vein as the video that you were talking about what this means and what are the advantages of trying to be a free agent. And what I mean by that is basically, there are all of these irritants that we come up in our life where, you have a certain kind of client that you never ever want to engage with again. You have a certain kind of boss that you never want to have to engage with again. You have all of these, or you're working in a certain industry where the red tape of that industry really kind of keeps you locked in and doesn't allow you to be able to kind of move around with freedom. And so I find that another sort of the other reason that I like to be sort of cross-disciplinary and not really commit myself too strongly to any one discipline is because it allows me a little bit of freedom and leeway to color outside the lines and to kind of play not really play by any specific industry's rules. So for example, with like I was saying, where I try to go about even my academic writing in slightly experimental ways, that would end up being a problem at some point if, for example, academia was my life, if I had to, rely on it for my livelihood, where I had to, I would have to, if I had to commit myself wholly to academia as a discipline, that would end up becoming a challenge at some point, where I would at some point have to play by someone's rules, because that is how you end up advancing in a particular industry, or being able to, profit from it more strongly, where you even if you're in a particular industry or on a particular track, especially if it's a certain kind of job market or a job industry, there is a certain trajectory that you need but also want to follow, where you want to be more successful at what you do, you want to secure your position more strongly, you want to be able to grow in that field, you want to be able to take on bigger kinds of bigger tasks and more responsibility, you want to be promoted, you want to get paid more. There are all of these realities to any kind of work. And
standard incentives. Yeah.
right, exactly. And that happens across any kind of discipline and any kind of field. And I mean, that's just like a reality of life, is that whatever you're doing, you want to do it better so that you can make a better life for yourself. And so so that's the other challenge with trying to be interdisciplinary, is sometimes, you if you're trying to do too many things, okay, then you come up against this problem. Okay, what is it that I actually do, and what is it that I am able to? To some degree, all questions do come back down to: are you able to use this to support yourself and create a living for yourself? So I feel like the reason that I have tried to develop different disciplines at the same time is so that I always have some kind of a safety net, or some kind of if one particular thing only is able to support me to a certain extent, then I have something else that's able to support me. And that is kind of a long game that you have to play. It's not something that will deliver results instantly. It is something that you have to kind of strategize over the long term, where you think about how to kind of develop these slowly in parallel, so that it's almost like the process of creating multiple streams of income in a way, right? But when you are in a creative practice, everything moves at its own pace, and different types of work move at different paces. And so you want to kind of be aware of those things where for example, I talk about, in the video that you were mentioning, I talk about how it helps to kind of use your most developed skill first, in order to kind of help support the other areas of your practice that need a little bit more time. So, for example, if I am working on
or secure a client, maybe using
that.
And
this is, I mean, everybody kind of does this in a way where, for example, if they have a dream job, they have a day job right now where they're working on a particular thing, but they're saving up on the side to be able to finally pursue their dream job at some other point. But basically, you're using the skills that you have right now with you to be able to support the other areas of your practice. And so I find that in a multidisciplinary practice, where I'm trying to work on different things that all move at different paces, for example, it would take an art project like the Dollhouse project a lot longer to monetize or become profitable, versus, say, my design consulting practice, which has much quicker turnaround, right? I am able to, and that's because I'm trained as a designer. So people can kind of, people are confident enough to come to me with projects. I'm able to secure clients more easily in that field. I'm able to ramp up and be able to charge more over time, because I am well versed enough in that field to be able to position myself as something of an expert. And so I am able to kind of build my client base that way, and be able to monetize that work far more quickly than I can monetize, say, a writing project or a miniature project or an art project and things like that. And so the way that I like to think about it is, how can you use your first skill, or your most developed skill, or your most monetizable skill? How can you use that to then support the other areas of your practice and be able to I like to think of it as using your income to buy yourself time. And the more you're able to use your sort of easiest, quickest, most accessible skill to kind of ramp up as quickly as you can, so that you're able to earn more in that way, so that you're able to kind of buy yourself time. So when my design consulting practice reached a certain level of maturity, where I was then able to take on big enough projects that I'm able to, say, take on one project every 2 or 3 months, and that would be enough in terms of a monthly income. So that way I was able to then, say, spend 2 days a week on my consulting work, and then I get the remaining 3 days of my work week to be able to work on other projects. So I think it comes down to a lot of those kinds of practicalities of how do you kind of strategize the sort of the long-term vision for your career in such a way that you're slowly building up to other things. And at the same time, it's not just about leaving it to kind of stagnate in that same position. It's about how, okay, you're using the 3 days of the week. How are you using the 3 days of the week to ramp up all of those other areas of your practice so that eventually, say in 1 year or in 2 years or in 5 years, they are able to then take on some of the burdens and be able to kind of create that balance. And for me, this year has actually, not this year, I mean 2022, which is last year now, has been really kind of monumental for me because that was the first year where design consulting did not take up the lion's share of my annual income, where I did a collaboration with Samsung, where I had to create a miniature room box for one of their ad campaigns. And that project ended up kind of tipping the scales because for the first time, my yearly income was not, it was not contributed to majorly by my consulting practice, which has been the case for many years, where for me the my annual income, the most of it would be attributed to my consulting work, where that was my main source of income, and all of the other things that I do, whether it's miniature commissions, whether all of these little things would be smaller sources of income on the side, but not necessarily able to claim the lion's share of it. And so for me, 2022, that's why it was quite a monumental year, because that was the first time that the scales tipped. And so I could, say that now finally there is a certain balance that's being achieved in being able to establish multiple sources of income. And so I think that's, and that allows me again that freedom to operate as a bit of a free agent, where I can be, because I have multiple things going for me, and because those multiple things have reached a stage where they can be monetized and be profitable to me and be financially viable in some way, or have some kind of potential for financial viability, it allows me to be a lot more choosy about how I go about my engagements with other people, with other industries. I can pick and choose to a degree that a lot of people usually don't have the luxury of, where I can say, I don't need to work with 10 clients in a year, out of which 8 of them will be really, really difficult and annoying to work with. I can choose to work with my 2 favorite clients in the year. And that's all I need to do, because I don't have to work with the other 8, because my income is not fully hinged on that one particular type of work. It takes a while to kind of build up to that level of that freedom of agency, but at the same time, I think it is an achievable goal. It's a goal that never really ends. You have to kind of keep working at it and working at it. It is very much like kind of trying to run a business of some sort, where you have to really kind of put in the work to be able to sustain all of these different areas of your practice simultaneously, where they're able to kind of all collaboratively support you in this and create this web around you. You have to continuously network with people across different industries so that they know what you're doing, so that they know the value you can bring, so that you're able to, there's always some kind of a backup option, or there's always something to be. And I think it also just ends up then helping you in the long run, because then people start seeing your value in being able to move across different spaces. So you're able to act as a sort of go-between across different disciplines. And I find that happening with my academic practice at the moment right now, is because I am able to bring something different to the table, because I'm an academic. I mean, because I'm exploring my academic practice in creative ways, and that allows me a certain kind of liberty. It allows me a certain kind of liberty to play a little bit outside the rules, because I'm not necessarily committing myself to the industry as a whole where I need to play by its rules. And the minute somebody says, no, this is not how you do something, I'll be like, that's fine, because I'm not really trying to be I'm not really trying to be a full-time academic, so I don't need to play by those rules, and I can kind of try to do my own thing. And that's not an excuse not to try to do something well. That is not like coloring outside the lines doesn't mean that you color badly, so you do want to put some work and some thought into treating your work with a certain kind of care, not treating it carelessly. Like if I'm using elements of, say, academic writing in my work, I want to be thoughtful about that, because that is a discipline that has a certain kind of history. The same with miniature work, the same with design practice. All of these things have a certain kind of history, a certain kind of, they carry a certain meaning legacy, about what it means to do something well in that field. And so you want to be respectful of that. Just because you're not playing by something's rules doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job of it, because then nobody's going to take you seriously. That's the crux of it, is that if you do it poorly, nobody is going to take you seriously, and you're just you're doing a disservice to other multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary artists who are trying to make something out of their particular approach to their work. So I think it becomes really important then to be very aware and sort of educate yourself on what it means to do different types of work well. And it's really only for your own benefit, because again, like I said, it's easier when you're committed to a certain discipline to get by with doing mediocre work, because there'll always be somebody to hire a mediocre designer or mediocre writer or whatever. You can always be writing for some little blog or magazine somewhere, and nobody's really going to quality check your work too much. But if you choose not to commit yourself to a particular discipline, when you commit yourself to a particular discipline, it's like having having like a parent who might take care of you for your life, where you'll have a certain job, you may you'll find, if you lose one job, you may be able to find another one. There is a certain system that will support you, but at the same time, that system will also limit you, and it'll kind of draw lines around you and say, no, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you'll get frustrated with it. But at the same time, you're like, okay, this is my livelihood. I am able to make a living with this. But if you consciously choose not to commit yourself to a certain discipline, it's like you're out in the open sea by yourself, and then the onus is on you to keep paddling and keep swimming, and you need a certain kind of stamina and energy to do that. And so it then becomes really, really important then to whatever it is that you're doing, you have to do it well, because that's the only way in which people will take you seriously. I can't just be having like a little miniature practice as a hobby on the side and then not do a good job of it and expect people to take it seriously, or people to come to me with that kind of work. Then they'll just go to any other miniature artist who does it better, So if I'm going to color outside the lines, you have to be very conscious of doing a good job of it, because if you don't, then it's very easy for people to dismiss you because you're not really fitting into any particular box. But when you do it well, that's a really, really powerful thing, because then people can suddenly see this sort of very complex value that you're able to bring to a project. So I think that's what makes it really important to then be very aware of what it means to work in different disciplines, but also to do a good job of it.
Yes. I think, this is a good note to end. I mean, a lot of takeaways from here, but as you mentioned, that it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of patience. And I think most importantly, when you said about being a free agent and sort of out there in the open, a lot of faith is definitely required. On that note, so all the best, more power to you, and thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you. That's it. And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.